Welcome to Old Stuff Show. Today we're looking at part 2 of sheet music, the mirror of society. In part 1, you recall, last week we were looking at the first half of the 20th century and I explained to you that I look at sheet music as a historical document. I like to see things like social values and lifestyle and fashion and language, attitudes, etc. So it's a great way to learn a little bit about what times were all about in those days. So as we look at the wars today, we're going to see how these people reacted to war, their feelings, their attitudes, and their concerns. So it should be a very good learning experience for us. A little background: in World War I, Canada and Britain joined the war, or started with the war, in August of 1914. The U.S. came in April of 1917 with General Pershing. Before that, President Wilson wanted to keep the United States neutral, but they were needed, and they entered the war in 1917. So as we look at our samples of music here, we'll get to see some very interesting attitudes of the people towards the war at this time. We're going to start off with how people portrayed, or how the music portrayed the enemy as bad and evil. And this one here, "What the deuce do we care for Kaiser Bill?" Of course, you had to use the word deuce because you couldn't swear. That wouldn't be allowed in those days. So that was a substitute word. "What the deuce do we care for Kaiser Bill?" And people obviously were being very anti-German at that time. In this one too, when Jack comes back, you can see that the mustache of the Kaiser is being pulled in disrespect for the enemy, portraying them as evil and bad, and they have to be dealt with. So dealt with they were as the countries moved in. There's a lot of loyalty and patriotism that went on, and patriotism and loyalty for 2 or 3 things. First of all, in Canada, there's loyalty and patriotism to our own country here. So encouragement in this piece of sheet music, on Canada on. A lot of support for the soldiers in the beginning. Good luck to the boys and the Allies. And enthusiasm, hip hip hooray for the boys who went away. And that was the thing about World War I. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the beginning to go to war because it was an adventure for many, and some lied about their age. I told you about the gentleman in the oral history video that he had lied about his age at 14 and stayed over at the war for 4 years. But as the casualties mounted in the war, people weren't so eager to go as they were in the beginning. Another kind of loyalty was that for the king. And so you see some really beautiful sheet music, some illustrations in color, Boys of the King in this case. And again, for king and country, stirring up the emotions of the people to support the war. And hats off to the flag and to the king. Both the king and the flag were being honored, and they never forgot the Union Jack, and as they said, we'll never let the old flag fall. So people were determined. And in the case of Canada, in the beginning, when Britain was at war, Canada was at war, and so the call of the motherland was justified in song. And then, of course, the effort was that of not just Canada and the Commonwealth and Britain, and also many other allies celebrated in song. And then, of course, I'm back to this one from the oral history video. It's a long way to Tipperary, but on the bottom, the Soldiers of the King. And you may recall the 95-year-old lady singing to me that song, and I did play it for you. It's worth seeing if you haven't seen it. It's quite interesting. and you really get the feeling of how important loyalty and going to war was for the people in Canada in those days. And the eagerness was, and all kinds of sheet music over there. Goodbye Broadway, Hello France, and a lot of optimism. Like, we're going to be home and we'll eat our eggs at home on Easter morning, says this piece of sheet music. So there was a lot of optimism in this war, and a lot of things that were happening, and support was amazing. So for the women who were staying back, knitting was the big thing, knitting socks, knitting gloves, and of course this piece of sheet music celebrated that. It reminds us of pandemic situations where people are making masks, and same thing, support the cause. New technology came in World War I. The tank was started in war in that time. Towards the end of the war, airplanes came in. And also in my oral history video, you remember the gentleman who his sister said he was a Canadian hero, and he ended up going into the U.S. Air Force because he saw these things called airplanes towards the end of the war that intrigued him very much. But at the same time, while there was a lot of optimism and spirit and loyalty and patriotism and support, there was also some negative feelings, and often it came out in sheet music, like "Where's My Boy Tonight?" Songs like that were popular, and then for the young people, "I Want to Kiss Daddy Goodnight," and songs of support, and songs like "The Boys We Love," and this one, "I Want My Daddy." Morris Manley was a Canadian composer, and his little daughter Mildred Manning was publicized as Canada's greatest young singer. So her father was quite proud of her, obviously. So the big occasion was when the soldiers came back, and so that called for all kinds of sheet music, like this one, "You Are Welcome Back at Home, Sweet Home," and "When Your Boy Comes Back to You," very important for the mothers of the day. "When You Come Back, and You Will Come Back, There's the Whole World Waiting for You," very famous song at that time. And again, the Manleys, "When They Come Back." And "Home Again," that's the song of the world to me. But a couple little interesting side parts here. This one is kind of interesting because they were questioning about the impact of the war, first war, on a lot of the soldiers. So this song came out, and it does suggest a problem, perhaps. How are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? So there was a little concern about how soldiers were going to integrate back into society at that time. But at the same time, sheet music would show that there was pride. And, you want to make sure that your children recognize what your daddy did. Your daddy was a soldier. So a lot of different aspects of the First War that comes out in these pieces of sheet music. So when we go to the Second War, never quite as much in my mind. I liked music as historical documentation in the First War. The Second War, there's some pretty good ones, but there, some cheering for the troops and cheering for the country and so on. These two, they'll always be in England, very, very popular. This is another version of it here. They'll always be in England. And again, "Hope Till the Lights of London Shine Again." London took a lot of air bombing in the Second War, but loyalty and patriotism pumped up by music. On to Victory," a song of patriotism and courage. We can't forget courage. And then, of course, the Navy, songs about the Navy, songs about the Air Force, and looking at them as heroes, men in the air, and also the men on the sea. The Navy is here. Come in on a wing and a prayer is fairly well known. The next one is very well known. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. That's quite a popular one. And then, of course, there was a little bit of humor to some of the music. There was a line between the Germans and the Allies called the Siegfried Line. And so this song came out, and I'm sending you the Siegfried Line to hang your washing on. And put a little humor and a little optimism in the minds of the people at home. And also the steadfastness of people shows up in a song like this, The King is Still in London, and showing that King is still there, and we should support England and support the troops. And then predicting what's going to happen, there'll be a hot time in the town of Berlin. And so looking forward to the end of the war and what's going to happen. And popular singers like Bing Crosby, The Road to Victory, would sing that. So hope and patriotism and pride and loyalty and determination and support, some little despair, but all of these things come out as feelings that were there during the Second War, and sheet music documents it very well. That's the way we can understand it as clearly as anything. There's nothing like music, when you think of it, to stir up patriotism and support for a cause and create some unity in both lyrics and melody. So in both our parts, 1 and 2, you can see that sheet music is the mirror of society, and whether it be the decades that we looked at in part 1 or the 2 wars, it's a great way to learn. So I hope you enjoyed and learned, and reminder again to subscribe when you're watching these. That's important. And I have a lot of sheet music in storage, and I will put some of mine on eBay, on Lonrem, the ID for that, but I can't put everything on, of course. And so every Friday there will be a new addition to the video list. It's starting to grow. And again, let's go back to my grandfather. He said, be musical, B sharp and C sharp, and that's what we've tried to do in these 2 parts. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.